Like, dude, harvesting mealworms really sucks. Not if you learn the secrets of cleaning and harvesting mealworms by continuing to watch this video. Dude, teach me. Gladly. If you're not feeding mealworms to your reptiles, then you are wasting money. Mealworms are a great reptile food, are easy to keep and breed, lasting months and months, and absolutely easy to feed to your reptiles. We've been keeping reptiles for about 25 years, and I've been feeding mealworms almost that entire time. We'll go over the fine points in the next few minutes, as well as at the end, I'll give you 5 tips we use that you can use too. Hey, real quick, special note, this video is dedicated to Shane Agger. Let's take a few minutes to talk about the details of mealworms. Did you know mealworms are not worm? They are the larval stage of the darkling beetle. They undergo a complete metamorphosis, transforming from eggs to larvae, mealworms, then to pupa, and finally into adult beetles. Mealworms have a hard exoskeleton that doesn't grow. This skin is made up of chitin. As the mealworms grow, they molt and shed this exoskeleton 10 to 20 times before turning into beetles. When mealworms molt, they turn white. What, I don't have albino mealworms? Finally, after about 20 days, they turn into beetles, which are egg-laying machines. Time for some fun fact. Their exoskeletons are made of chitin, which is harmful to reptiles. Mealworms are packed with protein, healthy fats, and nutrients. They are increasingly recognized as sustainable food sources for both animals and humans, often compared favorably to traditional meats like beef in terms of content. Tastes like chicken. Mealworms are opportunistic feeders and often can consume a number of materials, including grains, decaying plant matter, and even cardboard. Would you be surprised to find out that many reptile keepers use mealworms and darkling beetles in their enclosures as cleanup crews? Mealworms can eat reptiles from the inside out. Check out this article from AC Reptiles. The link is in the description of this video. Mealworms can break down waste, including organic material and even polystyrenes, a common plastic. This ability to degrade materials that are difficult to recycle makes them valuable in addressing plastic pollutants, such as styrofoam.
Many parts are edible.
There's 2 ways to set up mealworms. First, for breeding and harvesting and feeding your reptiles, and the second is for feeding only. Let's talk about the breeding setup first. This is the easiest way to set up a breeding mealworm culture. Start with a bunch of mealworms you can obtain at reptile shows, pet stores, or online. The quantity depends on how quickly you want your culture to self-sustain for your reptile collection. Use a 6 or a 15 or a 27 quart plastic container with some ventilation. Add about 1.5 inches of wheat bran or oatmeal. We highly prefer wheat bran, and then add egg cartons. Feed your culture 2 to 3 times a week with firm vegetables such as carrots, sweet potatoes, squash, zucchini, or pumpkin. Some fruits like apples and pears are okay too. But I tell you what, they love pumpkins. The mealworms will pupate, then turn into beetles. The beetles will start laying eggs. At around 5 to 6 months or so, you'll start seeing little mealworms in the culture. That's as easy as it gets. Now, I'm going to have more on feeding and harvesting the mealworms from this setup later in the video. To speed up the process, you could start with beetles rather than mealworms. Some sites on the web offer mealworms and beetles, such as Midwest Mealworms. Another way to really speed up the process and get even more worms is to separate out those beetles once they hatch out. Beetles will eat the freshly laid eggs in their enclosure if given the chance, so you have to separate those beetles. Our method is to actually separate the pupa into another container, wait the 3 weeks for them to hatch, and then pull the beetles out of the pupa container. Here's a great way that we use to collect those beetles. Place the beetles in their own separate beetle container containing wheat bran and egg cartons. This new beetle container will be fed veggies every 2 to 3 days as well, and occasionally fruits. We'll wait a couple of weeks and move all the beetles to another container. The original container will be left alone for about 4 weeks while the eggs hatch and the new mealworms feast on the wheat bran. At that time, we'll again start feeding veggies. If you're using your mealworms strictly for feeding, not growing and breeding your mealworms, but you're going to feed your reptiles in the next week to 4 weeks, here's the Supreme Gecko method. Start with a 6, 15, or 27 quart plastic container with ventilation. Purchase the number of mealworms online for the best price. Stay tuned until the end of the video for a major money-saving tip. Add your mealworms to the container. Feed wheat bran just enough to cover the mealworms. As before, feed your culture 2 to 3 times a week with firm vegetables such as carrots, sweet potatoes, squash, zucchini, or pumpkin, or occasionally some fruit. That's it. Feed out of this culture when you need to. But what about harvesting? I don't want to get all of this food in frass and dead beetle carcasses. I don't want to feed that to my reptiles. Patience, my Daniel son. We're getting there. Now, get back to waxing my car. Remember what I said about their main food? Grains does a mealworm body good. You can give them grains by giving them oatmeal or wheat bran. But I'll tell you why we like wheat bran so much more in just a minute. But they also need moisture, and this is critical. You can spray them with water. We do this occasionally. But I tell you what, the margin for error is so slim. Do too much water, and all of a sudden you have mealworm yogurt. Another method that we use occasionally is water crystals. You know, the polyurethane gel pellets that plump up when you add water. Many gardeners use these crystals for adding moisture to their flower pots. Ultimately, we settled on mainly using vegetables. This is natural and healthy for the mealworms. Timing is the key word for feeding your mealworms. Timing. It's imperative that you feed your mealworms a healthy, nutritious food 12 to 24 hours before feeding the worms to your reptiles. This is called gut loading. Have you ever seen a cricket that's been feasting on carrots just before you feed them to your reptiles? They are orange. Feeding veggies to your mealworms hydrates them and fills them with great nutrients that go right into your animals. Shameless plug, we also use Supreme Feeder food. Be careful with this because a little bit goes a long, long way. Yeah, man, I've heard this from friends and watching other videos, but cleaning and harvesting is just a pain in the ass. So what's so special about your method? Timing. Timing is the key to the Supreme Gecko process. If you're growing and breeding your own mealworms or you're purchasing them to feed them immediately, it can be difficult harvesting them because of all of the beetles and the mealworms and the frass and the husks and the dead beetle carcasses. Before we talk about harvesting, let me tell you why I prefer wheat bran over oatmeal. It takes mealworms a long time to process oatmeal. It seems like there's always chunks of oatmeal whenever you go into your culture to clean or harvest. Go with wheat bran over oatmeal. There is an affiliate link in the description of this video that will save you a bunch of money on wheat bran. For the situation where you're growing and breeding your own mealworms, you're going to have a lot of stuff on the top of the substrate in your enclosure. On the day that you're going to feed, first clear off the surface of the container and move all of the stuff to one side. Note, you'll want to time this out to a couple of days after your last feeding. Then, thinly slice a potato or carrot and place it on the surface of the substrate. Wait about a half hour to an hour. Come back with a collection container. We use deli cups. Pick up the slices of the potato or carrot and brush off the mealworms into the container. Voila! You're going to probably have a mix of small mealworms and large mealworms, and you'll have to sift out the small mealworms and put them back in the grow-out container. Or you can use those small mealworms to feed small reptiles, like our small geckos. Now for the case where you're keeping your mealworms specifically just to feed to your reptiles. This is super easy, and again, it's all about timing. Let's start with a calendar day that you're going to feed. Let's pick Thursday. By now, you should have a really good feel for how much wheat bran your mealworms go through in a day or two. So let's back off 2 days from our Thursday date. That takes us to Tuesday. Feed your mealworms Tuesday, wait until Thursday. That wheat bran should be gone by that point. Wake up early morning Thursday and feed your mealworms carrots or other firm vegetables. Again, this is going to be their gut load. Then by late Thursday afternoon, early evening, you're ready to harvest your mealworms and feed them to your reptiles. Grab your sifter. Again, there's an affiliate link in the description of this video, and simply sift out the amount of mealworms you need, leaving the frass behind. You'll need to pick out any uneaten vegetables, of course. After gathering the mealworms that you need to feed to your reptiles, don't forget to add more wheat bran to your mealworm container so they have something to eat. Cleaning. Well, we've already talked about the methods of harvesting, and cleaning is almost the exact same thing. For growth and breeding setups, start with a new container, put about an inch and a half of wheat bran in there, transfer over the mealworms, the beetles, and the pupa. Use the paper towel method to collect beetles, and use the thinly sliced potato method to transfer over the mealworms. For the pupa, the simplest way is to manually collect them yourself. For the situation where you're strictly keeping your mealworms to feed your reptiles, it's all about timing. Wait the 2 to 3 days for them to finish their wheat bran, and then simply sift off the mealworms into another container. You should be left with only frass, the mealworm poop, which is actually a great fertilizer for your indoor and outdoor plants. Now here's a trick for both setups. As we mentioned, mealworms molt and leave their skin. Mealworms shed. The husks are messy and your reptiles will not eat the husks. To clean out the husks, you can take the culture outside and blow off the light husks, or you can use a handheld vacuum to collect the husks out of the containers. Quick and easy. And now for what you've patiently been waiting for, the 5 tips. To save a ton of money, buy mealworms in bulk. The mealworms that you don't use in a week or two, you can put right into the refrigerator. Mealworms kept at about 40 to 50 degrees will keep for months. If you keep too many mealworms in your container, that's going to generate too much heat. Too much heat means that the mealworms will pupate too soon. If the mealworms pupate too soon, you're left with a lot of pupas and not a lot of mealworms. You're wasting money. We feed our crested geckos the crested gecko diet mixed with water. Most of the time they eat all of their food, but occasionally they leave some uneaten and it dries up. We use these diet dishes with dried diet and offer them directly to the mealworms. They love this, and it also helps clean the dishes. When we're ready to feed our reptiles, we collect the mealworms into containers. We like to use deli cups. Don't ever dust your mealworms in these cups. If you dust your mealworms, it shortens their lifespan. So we don't dust them in the containers. Once we're done feeding out all of the reptiles, we take those mealworms that are left over and we put them right back into their container. Feed your reptiles with mealworm cups. Again, there's a link in the video description. These are escape proof as long as you don't overload the cups with mealworms. Also, any uneaten mealworms are recycled back into a grow-out bin, as any benefits of initially gut loading will be lost in 3 to 4 days. These mealworms in these recyclable containers are fed, and after a while they'll pupate, and those pupas will go into our grow-out bins. How about some bonus tips? If you're keeping your mealworms for feeding, keep them cooler, in the 60s to low 70s. This will expand their lifestyles and allow them not to pupate. And finally, and this is so important, wash your vegetables. Always wash your vegetables because you don't want to take any pesticides and introduce them to your mealworm culture. Cool, man. Then the dude will abide. So what's it like to order 100,000 mealworms at one time? Well, it's a real challenge. Watch this video right here and see how we handled unboxing 100,000 mealworms and putting them away and getting them ready to feed our reptiles. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next video.